Hey, what's up you guys? You're watching Team APS, Paul here. In today's video, I'm going to tackle a very controversial topic that a lot of people have been asking me about. It's been coming up recently, and that's the topic of FTKs in Yu-Gi-Oh! The two major FTKs that exist in the game right now are the I guess we call it the Pendulum Magician FTK that involves Supreme King Dragon, Starving Venom, and Lyrilusk Independent Nightingale. And the second FTK is the Gem Knight FTK involving Master Diamond or Master Brilliant Diamond and Lady Lapis Lazuli. And they're both burn FTKs, so they're both really popular. And some people have some very divided opinions on them. Some people think that they're good, they're healthy, they're fine. Some people think that this is solitaire, it's toxic, it needs to be banned. In this video, I'm going to give my thoughts on it. I'm going to weigh both sides. It's not just going to be a strictly impulse video. And at the end, of course, I do want to know what you guys think about it because it's a pretty, controversial topic, and I think there are a lot of good opinions to be heard. But let's start by first defining what exactly an FTK is. So, in Yu-Gi-Oh, you can OTK your opponent, and a lot of people already know exactly what that means. Putting 8,000 damage worth on the board, usually just through like several big monsters or whatever, and then attacking your opponent with all of them for game. That's the traditional view of what like an OTK is. It could also be done with Burn. It could also be done with Exodia, I guess if you're counting that. But an FTK differs from an OTK because it's a deck, or usually a deck, built around the idea of beating your opponent in the very first turn. So the goal is to make a deck that is as consistent as possible and has a strategy that is not super fragile, not super easily stopped, and if it goes off, will deal over 8,000 points of damage to your opponent and beat them. And by being an FTK, your opponent would not have had a chance to really stop you. If you go first, if you win the dice roll or the rock, paper, scissors or the coin flip or whatever, it means that you'll go first, you'll be able to execute your FTK, your opponent won't really be able to stop you, and then you get your free win. And oftentimes the only real cost to any of this is if your FTK is inconsistent, then maybe you won't see it and your deck might break otherwise. Or, your opponent might have the rare bit of counterplay, or you might make a mistake because generally these FTK decks do involve some type of a loop or series of card interactions. You kind of have to go through all these steps and then eventually your opponent will lose. It's not dissimilar to the idea of hand loops. We've had some of those in the past, and we've had some FTKs in the past. To name a few examples, there has been like Frog FTK, which, involved Substitute and Mass Driver and Ronin Totem and all those types of cards. So that was a really popular one. Magical Explosion FTK involved using Tune Table of Contents, Royal Magical Library, those draw spells, and then just, Magical Explosion to deal a load of damage to your opponent the moment they hit their draw phase. So most people would say it's still an FTK. I mean, your opponent gets a turn, but they really don't. Those have all been really popular FTKs in the past, and they've also all been, sort of eventually dealt with on the ban list, consequently. So, let's talk about the current FTKs. You guys know what they are, so I won't really spend too much time talking about it. You probably have seen the Pendulum Magician FTK deck. I mean, it actually topped at YCS Atlanta, which is a really big deal because we don't usually see these FTK decks topping. And that is, I think, an important point to keep in mind is that generally speaking, a lot of these FTK decks exist, but many of them are inconsistent. The thing with FTK decks is they do involve a lot of pieces, and they are usually frail. So one type of disruption usually ends the whole thing, or they might not even draw all of the cards that they need. But the thing about these two recent FTKs is they're actually both quite consistent, and especially in the case of Pendulum Magicians, they actually are not much different than the normal strategy for these decks. So with Pendulum Magicians, I mean, you only really have to open with, a way to make Supreme King Dragon Starving Venom, and that could be a normal Magician hand anyway. You can pivot if these things get disrupted in this deck, at least, and just end up with a normally powerful Pendulum Magician opening. Gem Knights are similar. They're a bit more frail because if their combo gets disrupted, they don't have as many, powerful standalone like combos to go on, but I mean, it's still a very consistent strat. And so with FTK decks in the past, when you think of things like Royal Magical Library and those types of things, they were way like one-trick pony type decks. Like it simply didn't. If anything went wrong, it just kind of stopped. So yeah. Now I'm going to list some good points and some bad points, and then finally give my verdict. The good points. Let's be fair here. They're creative. I think that FTK decks are, at their core, pretty creative. Usually it means that somebody did have to... Oh my god, there's light on me. Somebody did have to sit and create this FTK. Usually it's what maybe some people would call an exploit. But yeah, I mean, somebody sat down with their cards, strategized, found a series of card activations, combinations, combos, strategies, whatever, that can burn your opponent for a lot of damage in one turn. I think that in this game where we complain so much about lack of creativity and, you know, like everyone just plays the same thing because it's an easy win, I think that if you're going to make that argument, then you have to at least acknowledge that FTK decks are creative. What maybe isn't so creative is the fact that after an FTK has been, you know, discovered, then everyone will kind of hop onto it, and at that point it gets a little bit, you know, then maybe it is kind of more of a sheep thing. Now, the next good point is that they are legal. So nothing about an FTK is illegal. It's totally allowed within the constraints of the game. I mean, it's not like you're really exploiting anything or cheating your opponent. Some people might say that it's like solitaire, but the fact of the matter is these are all cards that are not on the ban list. You know, you're using totally fair cards that your opponent has full access to. And so you're winning when a completely legal means. You know, people think of battle damage as the only way to win a duel, but I mean, burn damage is a thing. And that brings me actually to the third point. Alternate win conditions are kind of cool to see every now and again. Because, you know, we're used to just getting OTK'd or just having an unbreakable board, you know, as they say. But it's kind of neat to see Exodia every now and again, Mill decks every now and again, Final Countdown every now and again, Chain Burn, and those types of things. They're very annoying. I don't really enjoy playing against them, but I do think that they have a place in Yu-Gi-Oh! And it's, you know, like I said, these are legal things. They're in the game. You can win these ways. The rulebook says, you know, like if you can't draw a card, you'll lose. So a mill deck is a viable strategy. If your life points reach 0, you lose, which means a burn deck is a viable strategy. And the last thing that some people say, and I think this is actually kind of an interesting one, especially in regards to Pendulum Magicians, is you might have lost anyway. It might be that, you know, Pendulum Magicians were kind of going to mop your deck regardless. But I don't know that this argument entirely holds up. We'll talk a little bit more about that. So the first downside to FTKs, argument against them, counterplay is kind of difficult, if not impossible. So yes, we have hand traps, and you can say what you will or may about them, but generally speaking, in the case of an FTK, hand traps are all you got. They're the real savior in this story, because if your opponent goes first, what else are you going to do? You can't use traps to stop them. You won't be able to use your Twin Twisters or MSTs or Cosmic Cyclones. You can't, you know, use a Torrential Tribute or a Solemn or anything to stop a play. So all you really got is Effect Veilers, and, you know, you can use Effect Veilers to stop, like, Master Diamond or stop, you know, Supreme King Dragon or whatever, and save yourself the damage. Or you can use Ghost Ogre in some cases to get rid of these cards. Ash Blossom can maybe stop them from searching a key component. But if you don't have those hand traps, then there is no counterplay. And getting those hand traps is luck, because if you're going second, it really all just comes down to if you draw them or not. You have no control over your own destiny, and I think that is something that I never have liked much about, you know, the counterplay to FTKs, is when it just feels like whether or not I stop it isn't really up to me. It's not really a matter of my skill necessarily. It just feels like, well, if I open with these cards, I'll survive. If I don't, then I won't, and that sucks, because it's like, well, I'm not, you know, I'm going to feel like you're interacting. Because otherwise it's solitaire, is another kind of argument here. It's like your opponent is playing with themselves. There is no interaction, really. If they're getting these combos and these plays, then they're getting the combos, they're getting the plays, they're doing the stuff, and that's that. You know, some people even view these things as exploits, because oftentimes these aren't archetypes. It's usually one obscure card mixed with another obscure card or misworded card, and then just exploited for the win. And especially in the case of Pendulum Magicians. I mean, Independent Nightingale is a card that really, it's been known that it can cause FTKs. It's the reason that Tyrant Neptune got banned. And I don't, know how they're going to deal with it this time, but it's not a card in the Pendulum Magician deck. It's just something that you can choose to include so that you now have access to an FTK. And also, these are getting easier and more consistent. In Yu-Gi-Oh! Today, it's really, like I said, Pendulum Magicians can usually do this just fine. Like, it's a consistent FTK. Gem Knights can do it rather quickly and easily. Back in the past, sometimes FTKs require you to draw, like 3 or 4 different cards in your opening hand, and oftentimes these things weren't searchable. Not so much the case anymore. I mean, nowadays you can see Brilliant Fusion and, you can see Instant Fusion, all that stuff. A lot of these cards are searchable. And like Pendulum Magicians already have consistency outside of this, so just getting some dark monsters in their hand is not often that difficult. And last but not least, people are just generally against alternate win conditions. I'm not against alternate win conditions, but I do see how they can feel annoying, because when you prepare to face a normal deck, it really can be off-putting when you lose to a strategy that is kind of foreign, kind of weird, kind of hard to really counter. So yeah, my opinion is that I don't like FTKs. I don't really feel that they make the game enjoyable to play. I think that as nice as they are, and I don't even mind them on occasion, but really and truly, the game is not fun with FTKs involved. It's not fun to have your opponent go first because you lost a chance dice roll, and lose because of it, while also not being able to do anything about it. You're not in control. You just, whatever happens, happens, and that sucks. And now you lost game 1, and what if you're playing the FTK? Because if these FTKs are consistent, then that means that a lot of competitive players are going to just flock to those. If that's the way that wins, if people want to win tournaments, they will play FTKs. And if everyone's playing FTKs, that's not fun for anybody, because then that dice roll or coin flip or whatever becomes magnified by like 100 times, because now it's like, I'm playing an FTK, you're playing an FTK, whoever wins the dice roll will win, and then in game 2 the other person might go first and win, and then in game 3 back to me and I FTK you again. That sucks. That is not Yu-Gi-Oh! To me. That is not fun. That's not interactive. The last question then comes down to how does Konami deal with it? How should they deal with it? I think, and I've always been a proponent of this, the FTK enabler cards are the cards that need to get banned. I don't think the decks need to be hit. I don't think that like Gem Knights need to lose, Brilliant Fusion and all these other good cards they have. I don't think like Pendulum Magician should lose, like Supreme King Dragon, Starving Venom. I think it's a pretty cool card. But unfortunately, I think that like Independent Nightingale probably should get banned. And I think that, either Lapis Lazuli or Master Diamond, probably, I guess it'd be Master Diamond could go to 1. I'm not sure. Or, maybe like Seraphinite could get hit in Gem Knight. There's a lot of ways to look at it, but I don't believe in hitting decks hard. I think that the FTK card should go. That's why I'm glad that like things like Magical Explosion in the past, that's gotten hit. Things like what would be the card? Mass Driver, Toon Cannon Soldier. Those types of cards are the ones that I think need to be targeted, and I hope that Konami will hit them and not hit decks. And then I guess maybe the final little question would be, is this going to cause an emergency kind of adjusted ban list? Because we've seen that in the past. If these FTKs get dominant enough and they show up enough at events, like, will Pendulum Magicians have to suffer a nerf? What will it be? Not sure about that. But that's all part of the stuff that I want to hear from you guys in the comments. So let me know, what do you think of FTKs? Are they good? Are they bad? Are they healthy? Are they not? And, how should the current bout of FTKs, because there are a few of them, how should they get hit? Do we limit stuff? Do we ban stuff? Should we hit cards at the source? Should we hit everything? Just nerf decks altogether? Who knows? Anyway, that's the video. Hope you guys liked it. I feel like I've talked long enough. So tell me what you think about FTKs, and I'll see you guys in the next one.